wanted to throw this in super quickly that when Damian is talking about human capital, he's talking about earning potential. That's something that we clarified after the interview, and I just wanted to make sure and include that. This is the Entrepreneur on Campus podcast. Let's go. On each episode, we talk about a new industry or market, including the entrepreneurial opportunities, the pains, and the surprises of that industry. Listen, the business world is so broad, and we are here to dissect all of the different ways that entrepreneurs make money.
Software, you make it one time and sell it 1,000 times.
E-com spaces, man, those things sell for like an 8x multiple. It's ridiculous.
Three main ways that we make money, and the primary one is actually ad sales.
The goal is usually to exit within 3 to 7 years.
I'm your host, Matthew Brown, and I've created this podcast to help you discover hidden opportunities. Thank you for tuning in, and here is today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneur on Campus podcast. I'm hyped to have Damian Fink here today. I took a class from Damian, and anyway, I'm super happy to have you here, Damian.
Great, excited to be here.
So let me tell you guys a little bit about Damian. So Damian started as a commercial real estate agent in the San Francisco Bay Area in 2002. In 2006, he broke out on his own and started Tribune Commercial. And wanting to take advantage of the market downturn, he focused on building a commercial real estate investment company, CCIG, in 2009. In early 2018, Damian completed the sale of his ownership interest in CCIG and remains as an advisor to the company. The co-founder and COO managing broker of California Capital, an investment group, Damian managed the company's core operation and built its commercial real estate investing, private equity, and management arm, acquiring over 1.5 million square feet of office, retail, and industrial space over the past 10 years. So Damian has a lot of experience in real estate, and besides that, something that I really was able to take away from Damian in his class was his systems that he has developed of success in whatever field that you go into. So that's actually what I wanted to focus on mostly today. So Damian, I'd love to start out just asking you a question and asking you if you'd tell this story that impacted me, which is the cat on the couch story.
The cat on the couch, yeah. So I like that story as well. It was there's a point where I was burning myself at both ends and working a lot of long hours, and I was about early 30s. And one morning was going to the office and noticed the cat on the couch. So the background of the cat on the couch is this. We bought a new couch. We liked it. We had a dog and a cat at the time. And we really wanted the couch to remain without fur and dander and everything else. And so the rule was no animals on the couch. And so with the dog, it was pretty easy. So he tried to get up there and we swat him off and he got off. And the cat, a little more difficult. And so, but after a while, he'd kind of figured it out. And but when I was not there, other family members weren't as diligent. And so the cat would get on the couch. And over time, he just... that became kind of his home. And so I have this picture of walking up the stairs, and on the beanbag is this kind of dejected dog on the beanbag looking at me, and then on the couch, a cat looking at me just without any care in the world. And I thought, man, that's interesting. This cat just won. So I had this resolve, and I wanted life to turn out a certain way, and the cat just wouldn't have any of it, and he kind of won. And at the time, I was working a lot and was trying to figure out, how do I exercise a little bit more? How do I find the time? How do I find the time to get done the things that I want to get done in my personal life? And it seemed like I needed a 2 to 4 hour block to get it done, and I couldn't find it. And there were people in my life at the time that would come out and visit, and I found myself working very hard to make sure that they had a good experience at the house and kind of accommodating, certain people are rocks in the river, and the river kind of has to flow around them. And I thought, man, I want to be that rock in the river. I want to get things done, but I keep getting pushed around. I'm the dog, right? The rejected dog in the beanbag. So look at the cat, and I need to harness my inner cat. I need to just sit on the couch, and I don't care if you don't think I should be there. And so how that translated for me is at the office, I just told my assistant, hey, don't schedule anything until 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to be here until 10. And a few of the partners initially, didn't like that. And some tried to schedule me before, and I just didn't show up. And that was a source of contention for a while. And then fast forward a month or so, we're in a meeting with a few of my partners, and we're talking to a client. And the client, we're trying to schedule the next meeting. And they proposed, hey, let's meet next week at, we can come in at 9. One of my partners spoke up and said, oh, no, you can't. Damian doesn't get in until 10. It has to be after 10. And I was like, oh, okay. And so they kind of worked at it, and I sat there going, I'm the cat on the couch just hanging out, and everybody's working around me, or I'm that one buddy that everybody just seems to have to accommodate their mood and diet restriction or, whatever. And so for me, it's a good reminder that too often I just – whether I was born a certain way or just have a certain inclination to do things, we always want something different than what we have. But a lot of times until our thinking changes and we get comfortable being a little uncomfortable, and for me that was not being the first one in the office, and what if I show up later, and all these fears and things that come with being a little bit outside of your comfort zone. But you're making a bet in a way, and the bet would be me coming in at 10, and the work and the personal time will generate a more significant return to myself and a higher return to the company as a whole. Because what you don't want to do is show up at 10 and then things slack off and it's worse. Then it's much harder to be the cat on the couch next time. People are really going to go after you. And so you're kind of taking a bet when you step out of your comfort zone. And for me, that was a moment among many others where you just kind of, it reminds me, that picture, to just step out and focus on, again, it's exercise and all the things that I personally thought I needed to be done to be more successful, those habits and those routines. I needed that 4-hour block, and it worked.
Yeah. It's like you said, I've seen it in my own life that so many people have, they just have this persona, and they see themselves as the person that's sitting on the couch for whatever reason, and the world just treats them that way. And it sounds like it's something that you can become, and you just have to kind of recreate yourself like you did in your position to be able to do that. Do you feel like that paid off for you and that you became more successful because of that?
I think so, and I think more so just having that mindset of I need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And a lot of people know this, if they're training for a marathon, or they're working for that new job, or they're going after that new relationship, or any kind of stretch point in their life where they're putting themselves out there to really kind of stretch a little bit. You find yourself at night maybe going to bed a little sore and uncomfortable, maybe with a little more anxiety about, I put myself out there for this employment position, I put myself out there for this relationship, and it's hard to sleep because you just, how's this going to turn out? Did I say too much? I'm sitting on the couch. Am I going to get swatted?
Vulnerable.
Yeah, very vulnerable. A lot of people, it's difficult to be that way. And so I found in my own life, if you are going to bed happy, comfortable, there might be something wrong. You need to be uncomfortable, especially a lot of the kids that I have the opportunity to work with. This is the time where you need to be uncomfortable. You need to be sore. You need to be kind of spent. You need to be awkward, having awkward conversations, sounding like an idiot because for all intents and purposes, you're an ignorant individual that's trying to make sense of the world and, make your mark. And it's the time to sound like it and own it and be it and make mistakes and learn from it and grow. And a lot of people don't do that, and they're just, that figurative dog on the bean. They just don't take those chances. They don't raise the hand in class. They don't, go for the girl or the guy and put themselves out there. And so the world doesn't give them feedback that they need to hear. And so without that feedback, how do you correct your behavior and your self-identity and all that kind of stuff? And so without the world giving it to you, you start making it up in your own head, and you create this kind of synthetic view of yourself, and instead of getting real feedback from real people, you kind of have your internal dialogue that's not checked. And so there starts to be a disconnect between you and the real world and an insecurity inherent in that. And it just kind of spirals. So the only solution is just to be a little bit funky and weird and awkward and dumb at times and own it. And
put yourself out there.
Yeah, put yourself out there and grow from it and kind of become. And it's difficult, right? You're vulnerable. And the longer you wait, the harder that is, because that gap between your persona and what you think of yourself and what the world thinks of you gets bigger and bigger. And don't want to wait too long. Take advantage of being a student and get it out of your system. I mean, speak up in class. If you don't know something, it's okay to be a little bit ignorant, right? And I think too often people think it's better to keep your mouth shut and than to open your mouth and be a fool, show who you are, and kind of be the fool, or however that quote works out. But
how are you supposed to learn if you're not willing to try to ask a question, right?
Yeah, how do you learn, and how do you learn who you are, right? And I think getting real world feedback. So you train for marathon, you push yourself, you're sore, so it's go to sleep uncomfortable, be uncomfortable. And so that experience, the time in the morning, allowed me to work on things that I thought would make me uncomfortable, stretch, whether it's physical or kind of spiritual or academic or anything. Mm-hmm. I needed that time to work out, so to speak, and that helped me be better at work. And so it paid off.
Awesome. I actually just went and spoke in an entrepreneurship class today, a couple hundred students in there, and I was extremely intimidated speaking to them about the podcast, actually. But now that that's something that I've done, I feel like I can do it again easier, and I think that it's going to help grow the podcast a lot. So, I think that'll pay off for me too, just trying to put myself out there. And I've also noticed I've been able to interview some really cool people for this podcast, and before some of these interviews, I've been pretty nervous because they've been people that are pretty well known, pretty reputable, and so it's very scary for me sometimes to go in, and because I am kind of that ignorant kid that doesn't know everything. But I totally agree with that. I think that there's a huge payoff for trying to put yourself out there and be uncomfortable. So I know that you started doing that, and then you started implementing morning routine. Can you tell me, that's something that I've asked actually a lot of my guests, is if they have morning routines, and a surprising amount of them do, and they're pretty stickler to it. Can you tell me what your morning routine looks like?
So I'll tell you what my, optimum morning routine was when I was really working a bit more than I am now. And what I have found as well, people that I chatted with, is everybody's unique, kind of custom tailored to everybody's wired, has a little more energy, different times of the day, and has their own thing. But for me, what I found was very important to me is first thing of the day, having some kind of spiritual experience. And for me, there's a kind of a religious angle to that. And it also included, meditation and other tricks to get my mind to be focused in the present. So Eckhart Tolle, great book, probably one of the only books that I've read 5 times in a row, I think, is what I did. And so it's and you could probably do notes to it, but it's, I think, Practicing the Power of Now. And the essence of that, and Stoicism in general, and all these different philosophies, is okay. Can you be present? Can you be here now, or are you thinking about something that happened in the past? Are you thinking about something in the future? When you are, you did put yourself out there that day. Are you going to stay up all night thinking about, I should have done this different. Maybe I should have done this better. And so, starting the day clean slate is important. And so there's different tricks that I have used over the years to get myself to that point. Certain periods where there's just a lot of stress, a lot of things going on at work, I would have a different tactic to address what I call the marbles in my head. You wake up and your brain is just spinning. Mm-hmm. And so I had a journal, I call it the burn journal, and it sits by my bed, and I just start writing anything that comes to mind. And there's some weird stuff that comes out of your mind, but you just want to vomit it all out there, get it out of your head, because unless it's grounded in something tangible and real outside your mind, things can just spin. And so journaling in general is a pretty powerful tool. That's a specific type of journaling that I found that kind of works. But in any event, whether it's prayer, meditation, whatever technique, 10, 15, 20 minutes of some type of spiritual exercise where you can be silent and you can enjoy your own presence and be still. And so I think that's key. And the second thing for me, some type of exercise. So some type of cardio exercise. I measured it as, the 20%. So my BMRs, I burn about, 2 to 2,500 calories a day. So I'd look at it and go, okay, my heart rate at whatever my optimum, I should be burning about 400 calories. So whether that's stair climbers, in California it was running, there's a Lafayette Reservoir, I'd go hit the reservoir and run back to the gym that was down the street. So that's about 4 miles. I'd hit that pretty hard. And so the idea is, I need to burn those 400 calories and then do some type of flexibility strength training. Mm-hmm. So I'd be about an hour and a half. And we've got horses, and we moved out to Utah, bought some horses. I thought it'd be a fun exercise for the girls to break them in. And it was fun, and it was what I learned. The horses aren't very receptive until you got to take them in the round pen and just run them around till they're sweaty, and then they'll listen to you. Otherwise, you just can't get on a horse that's cold, that has a lot of energy, and expect not to get, especially me, limited riding experience. It's not, you got to warm them up. And so I think we're wired similar. In the morning, you got to burn energy. So one, spiritually, okay, am I just at a good spot where I'm here now? Physically, our natural man, those physical tendencies, we can either go through the day trying to buck ourselves off and fighting the subconscious with the conscious all day, or we can first thing in the morning kind of kick our own butt. And hey, there's something that comes from feeling in control of our physical body. So spiritual,
beat the crap out of the horse,
run him down, get him sweaty, right? So for us, and there's all sorts of health benefits to that. So spiritual, physical, and after that, then it's relationships. So I'd always get up, make breakfast with the girls, take them to school. And then after that, some type of self-improvement. I tried to do something unrelated to the work that I was doing. Sometimes I just, because of time constraints, I had to. But in general, there's the great courses, master class, of maybe it's a book. And it wouldn't just be a casual read. I would be taking notes and studying whatever subject. So, Eastern art and, history of banking. Whatever course, whatever stuck out, I would just study that. And so, because I found that a lot of different disciplines, you can learn and apply principles from all different types of disciplines. And so the more that you know, the more you can start piecing things out that can perhaps help you in your own career. So that would take me till about 10 o'clock. And then
let me just ask you a question while we're on the self-improvement. So something that I remember that you talked about was when you read books, and you say most people, they read books and then they kind of just forget everything that they read, or they remember it but they don't apply anything, and how you like to intentionally pick a couple things to apply. Can you talk about that for a sec?
So this is kind of the rabbit hole. So I'm a little OCD when it comes to studying and applying and organizing. So which ties back to a type of journaling that I like to do, to keep track of life lessons that I learn, but also books that I read and things that I come across that are kind of important. I was at an education week one year sitting next to a lady, and we were listening to, I think, Robert C. Line, and he was giving a talk on, I think, gospel symbolism. It was a particularly great class. And afterwards, she stood up, looked at me, and said, "Hey, that was a great thing. Man, I wish I could remember it." And she kind of walked out, and she didn't have a notebook or anything. And I thought, wow, it's like a back rub. And I thought to myself, like, a lot of times I show up to things that are educational or stimulating or whatever, and it's a back rub. And Herman Ebbinghaus in the 1800s did this study of, the forgetful curve or forgetting curve or whatever he calls it. And it's for how much stuff that you can process, how much can you remember after a certain amount of time. And there's a loss, right, as time goes on, especially if you're unfamiliar with the content. And so I'm sitting here going, man, I'm going and I'm feeling good about this, but how am I going to apply? That has no long-term effect. I'm not going to remember this, number one. I'm not going to apply it, number two. And other than feeling good right now, this had no effect on my. And granted, there's a benefit to being with like-minded people, having an experience where you're just, I feel good for being here. Yeah. But that's not why a lot of people go. They want to change, and sometimes those discussions and things prompt change, but unless you have a system for changing, it's going to be difficult. And if you're a busy person, it's even harder. You have a lot going on, so how do you incorporate change in your life and become better? And most people, there's a book called The Slight Edge, and he talks about how people are hungry, and that hunger drives you to acquire and become. And after a certain point where that hunger is satiated, what do you then do? A lot of people hang out and sit, and performance goes down. People stop applying the skills and the tools and discipline that got them to the food, and then all of a sudden they're hungry again. And so there's this, you can think of like a wave, ups and downs, but there's never, at the top of the wave, how do you take it to the next level? Well, there's a concerted effort to find principles that are specific to you that will help you grow and progress. And over the years, building a good system, that's kind of what helped me out. I mean, more than anything else, having a good method for doing that. What's important, and how can I prioritize of all the things that are important, what things I should be working on, and then how do I measurably track those things and incorporate them into my life. Very difficult. And I think part of that morning routine is keeping track of those types of things. And when you're reading something, are you reading it for a back rub? That's great. But the morning, when I'm studying intentionally, it's a little bit different. I'm looking for things. I'm looking for things that will help me out, tools and things that I can implement into my daily life. And so you've got to extract knowledge from these books. So audiobooks are great, but if you're reading a book, how do you take notes? And you take notes, where do those notes live after you're done? How do you reference them? Are you storing it by topic? Are you, this is the rabbit hole that we can go down, and that's probably a 10-hour podcast of how to do that. But thinking about problems like that and how to organize your life is important, because before you know it, all the people listening to this, they're driven people that want to be better. And so you find what you're looking for. And so anybody listening, they're going to be very busy people, productive people. And that, unless you have good systems in place, you can limit yourself to your potential, because there's only so much capacity we have unless we've got a good mechanism for organizing our life and kind of propelling it forward. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question, but there's a lot to that maybe someday we can rip apart, but yeah, you need a good system.
Yeah. I've probably read 7 or 8 books, I think, since that class, and that's something that I've tried to apply. Is I've created a separate location where I store all of the applications from the books that I want, and that's something that I'll try to review periodically, because I read a book and I go through. This is something that you said too. You can take a lot of notes, but you come back to it 10 days later, and most of the notes that you've taken, they're not actually valuable to your life. They just sounded good in the moment. But of the notes that you've taken, maybe 10% of those might be valuable. So that's something that I try to do. Is I'll read a book, I'll take notes on it, come back to it a couple weeks afterwards, and then pick 1 or 2 things from that book. Even though there's hundreds of different implementations I could have, pick 1 or 2 things and then intentionally try to implement that into my life. And just doing that has made a huge difference, because like you said, it's very easy to just have all these ideas and these thoughts, but not actually implement them. So that's made a big difference. So you said you do a little bit of reading in the part of your morning routine, and then where do you go from there?
So reading, so we've done what? Spiritual, physical, relationship, self-improvement, and then
financial, work, contribute. I'd love to go over those 3.
Yeah, so then you get to financial, and you're looking at the Evernote. So the most recent tool, I would say for the last 5 years that I've been using is Evernote to track all of this. It's a great tool. I organize it into those categories. So everything that I've got lives in one of those categories. So it's spiritual, physical, relationships, financial, work, and contribute. So moving along that list, financial was something that, all of us need to make money and pay the bills. And so there's, financial, you can break it down into 2 categories, human capital and investment capital. So everybody goes to school to increase the probability that they'll make more money, human capital. So the more money you make, the more surplus money you have for investing. And the idea is kind of a different discipline. Once I've increased human capital, then how do I increase my investment capital. And so that's kind of the game that everybody plays. And everybody looks at investing in entrepreneurship and they go, I want to do the investing side, and without a clear understanding of what that really is. And so you kind of, they both work together a little bit. But for me, when I was younger, and I'm not sure where I got the idea, but it was having a spreadsheet that tracked, it's like an income statement, a balance sheet. Where's my income coming from? There's a human capital component and an investment. So if I bought a property, I would get investment income, and that would fall in that bucket. If I had a 401k or an IRA, that money would go in there. And so the goal was, hey, this is kind of a game. How can I want to get to a point where my lifestyle demands X amount of dollars, and I want to earn 150% of that amount. So the goal was always to get to a point where my investments and passive income would be at least 150% of my lifestyle. So then 100% I could pay for my lifestyle, and then the other 50 is to reinvest and as a kind of a buffer. And so, once every couple weeks, once a month, just updating that. And it was this little spreadsheet that I always tracked, and it would help me make decisions when I thought, should I buy this toy or not? Man, I'd really like to turn that into investment capital somehow. And so that was one of the things that I think really helped me out in growing the investment side, and getting to the point where you kind of cross that threshold, and there's nothing more satisfying than updating that spreadsheet one day and just looking at it for a long while going, holy cow, what do I do now that you're over that mark? And so, but financial, that's kind of what it comes down to. What's your goal? And a lot of people don't have a goal. They just think, I want to make money. And the challenge with that is, okay, well, how much is enough? And what's your metric? How do you value that? What it needs to be a spreadsheet. I mean, it's money. You need to have it documented somewhere and have a goal. So that was financial. And then after financial, it was work. So work is really that human capital side of it. So what are your responsibilities? You have an obligation to your employer, or partners or somebody else. And so what are you doing to add value to your company? And that's specific, what kind of training, what kind of, whatever it is, but it's a place to capture all of that work-related stuff and those obligations. That's where that lives. And then contribute is, what it's all about. So after you've got capital and you're working through all that, there's that, what are you doing to contribute and give back? Because what I found after I kind of semi-retired and talking to a lot of different people trying to figure out, what do I do next? I was surprised that everybody had the common problem, which was we're just trying to figure out how to help out. What can I do that will have the best impact? Which was kind of cool that everybody was in that mindset, and it really made me think, man, if I could, going back, contributing should have been a component all the way through. Not that it wasn't, but you always think of, I'm chasing this employment goal to get to some end, and then nobody ever thinks of, okay, what if you achieve that end, then what? Your desire is going to be to go help other people and do things. And so like you're doing, the podcast helps a lot of people. It's a great tool that as you get more resources, then you can allocate more time and money to building this and helping more people. And instead of, if you're just focused on work and not this, starting from scratch, I think doing it both, contributing as you're growing is, so that's what that kind of folder reminder is for.
Yeah, I love it. So one other question that I had about relationships before we move on past this is, you've had the opportunity of sitting down with some really cool people. You mentioned Jordan Peterson was one. I think you mentioned, did you say Gary Keller? Or somebody who wrote a real estate book?
Jay, his partner, his writing partner. Jay Papasan, yeah. Jay
Papasan. So can you tell me why you do that and how you've been able to contact some of those people?
So fortunately, my background in real estate, so started in brokerage and then investing. The way you find deals in almost any profession, deals come from relationships more than anything else. And so I had a deal. One of my first office buildings that I purchased in Oakland was called the Pacific Building, and the bank had foreclosed on the property, and then that bank, I think, had gotten foreclosed on by another bank. So and I wanted to buy it real bad. I loved the building, was familiar with it, and it took about 12, 13 phone calls to figure out the right department, the right people that might have control of this property, that I might talk to about buying it, and I don't know how many other phone calls beyond that to then get to the right person. And that person, I called him up. They weren't interested. He was trying to figure out what assets they owned and inherited from this other bank. And so I called him about every week, and I did that for, I would say, a little bit over a year. And it got to the point where he would never call me back. I would just leave messages, and I thought, this has got to be annoying for this guy showing up. And I thought, well, okay, let me just Google jokes. Maybe when I call him, he's going to get a message, but instead of being annoyed at me, I'll just have a joke. And so I started just doing random stuff to kind of make it interesting. But I never stopped calling because I thought at some point something's going to happen. And they ended up going into contract with somebody else. And I still kept calling him, like, well, they're not going to buy it. They're not going to, have the money. We got the money. Come on, sell it to us. And so kept harassing them. And one day he finally called and said, hey, can you just write me a check and buy the building? I'll sell it to you. And but we had a good relationship, and after that, and we bought it, and it was great. So, but there's a lot of stories like that where if you're just more persistent, you're going to get it. So, in relationships, I just like people, and I like hearing their story and where they come from. And so, it's similar. When I moved to Utah a few years ago, I just wanted to get to know local people. So I was able to, you got the 40 under 40 list and all these other sources, and then networking and just meeting very interesting people. Some of them harassment. You just harass them until they call you back. But then once you meet with enough...
I think that I harassed you for like 4 months to get this podcast.
So that's kind of what it takes, right? And people are busy, and so that's kind of what happened. So it's been fun to meet them, and I think meeting them, I didn't have an agenda other than, hey, you seem like an interesting person, let's chat. I didn't have any employment expectations. I didn't have anything other than let's hang out, and I think that helps. So you're either meeting with somebody to get something, or you're just meeting to expand your network, and I think you need to do both. If you're working, a lot of those phone calls, you want to do a deal. But then also expanding your network and just meeting, networking events and other things are super important, because you never know when that person, you're going to need to use that relationship in order to do a deal. So super helpful. I had, John over at Wells Fargo. I bought a building in downtown Oakland. A lot of people competing on, but for years we had a good relationship. I've helped him out with certain projects, and when it came to taking offers, there's offers that are probably a little bit better than ours. Mm-hmm. But he kind of felt, hey, I owe you, and he knew we'd close, and so we got the deal. And I think relationships just help. And yeah,
I remember that you said in the class that you can measure your success by the amount of people that you could call at 9 p.m. and not have them get mad at you.
Yeah. Right. Super important. Yeah, in real estate, that's kind of what we said, is you're at the end of the day, when these guys are building relationships, when we're talking to the agents, you want to there's relationships that are business relationships, and there's personal. And the personal ones are the guys that you call at 9 o'clock at night, and it's like, hey, Damian, what's going on? As opposed to business hours. And you want good relationships with people, the guys that you can call at 9 o'clock and they'll pick up. And so when you're chatting with people and building a relationship, you got to think this can't just be transactional. Mm-hmm. I mean, every relationship, life's just a little more fun when you've got personal relationships with people. It's not just transactional.
I love it. So those were kind of the success strategies, and I've found them to be very beneficial. As you can tell, those are mostly just recalled from memory, not that I have notes on them, just because they've affected my life. And hopefully some of the listeners can apply some of those things. Also, if it's something that you're interested in, I'm also very happy to talk to anybody about those things a little bit more in depth. So last question that I'd like to ask you, Damian, actually there's two more. One is, what's your thought of students, college students starting a business in college versus becoming more educated first?
So I went to a semester of college, and then I self-graduated. I had enough experience outside of school, so working to start a cell phone store and other little ventures that I did without much success. I just knew college wasn't going to help get me to where I needed to go, and that is not. Grew up a little bit different, and I don't know that I want to get in my whole kind of history, but a little unique circumstance. I think it's great. if students can leverage school for what it is, school is a way of increasing human capital. There are also some other benefits. It crosses over to investment as well. So a lot of the tools and things you can use can apply to growing your investments later on. And so the financial and a lot of things, there's some cross-pollination, but primarily college is, I want to make more money as an individual. So the dentist, I've got a dentist buddy, he goes out and let's say he's making $400,000 a year in California with his practice. In earning from being a dentist, his value is significantly higher than if he just statistically left high school. So you leave high school and you're making $12, $15 an hour. You're making $25,000, $30,000 a year. You get a 2-year degree, you're making maybe $20, $30. You get a 4-year degree, you're making $60, $70. I mean, it's just basic math. Everybody believes they're the exception to the rule, and I'm going to leave and I'm going to go do something on my own. And statistically, it just doesn't happen. So school is a place where you go to increase human capital. You go there, you study, you network, you build connections, you get great internships, you graduate, you get the best job you possibly can. That's kind of what school is for, and it's great. And you can leverage those relationships, the tools, all that kind of stuff, in also helping you be an investor. The people that go to college and think, I don't want to focus on my human capital, I just want to do a business, that's a whole I don't even know how to address that because I've seen it done. I've done it myself. Think if you don't have a plan, and that's the thinking. So those that are, I want to go be an entrepreneur and I want to not focus on getting employment. I just want to figure out my own. I just haven't seen a whole lot of people be successful if they have no connections, no problem they want to solve, no history of any type of business that maybe their parents owned a shop and there's no connection. So I believe that it's easier to divert a river than to dig a well. And most people just think I'm going to go dig a well, and that's a terribly inefficient way to be successful. Life isn't just about the money and the I'm going to go be somebody and be a business owner and all that they associate with that. You want to enjoy life, and there's a certain flow to everybody's life and a direction and a path that they can feel the current kind of taking them. And a lot of times, because of insecurity or other things, they just want to jump and start digging for something. And it's like you've got usually most people have everything they need within their reach. They just need to practice that 15-20 minute early morning spiritual, just be still, be calm, and what's life telling you and where do you need to go and what opportunities are in front of you. But if you're in school and you don't have a clear path to being an entrepreneur or business owner, you should be focused on increasing your human capital because that's why you're here. And you're investing. It's a math formula. You can go on websites and figure out, I'm going to BYU, I'm graduating in engineering, how much money am I going to make, and what is the return on my investment based on my tuition, opportunity cost, and everything else. And there's a formula for that. And actually, BYU is one of the top in the nation for ROIs for education. It's phenomenal opportunity that all these students have, but that should be your focus. I mean, that's why you're here. So to be here and spending the kind of money, and that's the investment that you've already made, and then to be sidetracked by phantom ideas of, that's pretty risky. And I worked at Wendy's when I moved to Utah as a senior in high school. Right after I graduated, I worked at Wendy's for 2 weeks. I have the paycheck. It's on a frame on my garage wall. And I look at it to remind me that I think I'm worth more than the $4.64 an hour. And I was being trained on the grill by a guy who had a business degree from BYU. So something happened there, right? So that's what I think about that. I have a lot of kids talk to me about it. Again, being an entrepreneur, there is no easy path. There's no clear and obvious way to go. That's why there's risky. And I think a lot of people think it's a career, it's a job, you invent it, you create it, you make it, right? It's entrepreneurship. So for most people, really focusing on the human capital part is important. I have a good friend who's in real estate, very successful, could not work whenever he wanted to, that graduated from BYU in auditing, was kind of convinced by professors that he was going to be an auditor. He went and worked for the big 5 accounting firms in San Francisco. His first day on the job, he goes home to his wife and says, "I will never do this. I cannot believe I wasted all this time and money doing those internships and getting this job. I'm done with this." And his wife said, "Hey, sweetie, that's fine, but you can't quit until you find another job." So he found a job in real estate, basically being an agent. And I thought, wow, there's a couple ways to look at that story. And he said, I can't tell you how many times over my education's paid off, because to show up and on my resume is this top 5 accounting firm and I'm representing companies doing deals, they look at that and go, "Oh, you're that caliber of guy. You drive up in the car, you wear the watch. Those things mean something, and it implies a whole bunch of other assumptions that people just check the box, say, "Oh, you're that caliber of guy." So he didn't really know long-term what he was doing. He thought it was going to be auditing, but the fact that he really worked hard and got the internships and got the job opened the door for so many more opportunities. So if you don't have anything else going on, just be really good at what you're doing. And everybody has already invested and said they're increasing. That's why you're at school. Yeah. So, of course, if people have a better path, go for it. But it's a tricky one, and it's individual. And I'll go a little bit off topic a second on that. Is this principle of accredited investors, which I think we mentioned in class. So an accredited investor, if I've got an opportunity that's like a security that I'm offering to somebody to invest in, if they don't have a certain net worth and a certain cash flow, I can't present the opportunity to them. It's for accredited investors only. It assumes you have a high net worth and can take the kind of risk that's inherent in this deal. So, and the unfortunate thing is a lot of those, there's a lot of money, and I just can't give that to people that aren't accredited. And so when I was thinking about starting my own company and breaking off my own, I was 27 years old, very young to be starting my own brokerage company. I asked advice of probably 30 people, and there's 2 that stood out to me. One was a former mission president, and one was another member of my church. And both of them, conversations were so similar, it just stood out to me. And they went something like, "Hey, Damian, how you doing?" I told them what I was thinking of doing, and they dug into my personal life. "Hey, how's your family? How are your kids? Are you close with your wife?" Kind of thing. I mean, just trying to pull out for me where I'm at in relation to my stated values. Religion. Are you doing the things that you're supposed to be doing? And it got really personal, and I thought that was kind of odd, but I went with it. And it wasn't years later until I thought of that principle of being an accredited investor, and thought, I think what they're really trying to do is, these are successful people. They achieved a lot in life, and what they didn't want to do is have somebody that's drowning, looking for a life vest, or making an irrational decision to cover for some moral shortfall, and leap at any advice that they gave them, because then they're the owner of that advice, and now I'm going to them. They're accountable for the outcome. I think they wanted to make sure that I was an accredited investor, talking about spirituality, at peace with myself, comfortable, strong footing, because at that point, we can give him advice and he's going to do whatever he wants, and we're just giving advice. He's not drowning. He's not looking to cover up and do something else. And so that principle of being an accredited investor, being your own individual and receptive to those promptings and that I think has a greater, if you've got that, then rock and roll, right? So if you don't have your stuff together, and you're not an accredited investor, and you're a student struggling, you can't clean your room, your relationship with your parents is jacked up, you have all these issues, figure all that stuff out, but do well in school, build relationships, get good do what you're here to do first. And if something is pulling you from that, then you make a bet. I made a bet. I know people that you go with it, and that's part of the fun. But so I don't know if that answers that.
Totally answered the question. That's something that I ask all of the guests that I have, is their thoughts on starting a business in college versus getting more educated first. And I think that was an excellent answer. And thank you for that. The last question that I wanted to ask, and I think you kind of just answered this, let me know if you want to say anything else, is so what life advice, what's one piece of life advice that you would give to a young aspiring entrepreneur?
Is this any type of student, or are we targeting specific LDS students?
It's towards everybody.
Okay, everybody.
Yes. Specifically towards young entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs.
So what advice?
Yes. Do you have any piece of life advice for them?
Life advice for entrepreneurs. I don't know. I think I kind of covered it. Nothing's.
You just covered it, I think, pretty well.
Yeah, it's tricky. You know, I bought a home in California. We were renting when I first went out there. I got some capital. Decided I want to buy buildings and I need money. And real estate appreciates with inflation, and the compound effect of ownership and leverage is great. So I'm going to buy a piece of real estate so I can get some money and use that to eventually maybe someday buy a building. And I bought in 2007, literally at the worst possible time you could buy. I got into a tech company with my brother right before the dot-com boom, and the timing was just terrible. And I thought it would be a good idea. I have another brother to do foreign exchange currency trading, and I lost, I think, $30,000 in 2 minutes. I think is how that worked. And I've invested in restaurants and auto dealerships and all sorts of different things. And some work out and some don't. And then the last company used a lot of good information from past experience, and we built that, and that's been a great success. So entrepreneurship is just, there's the two type of entrepreneurs. Fixing a problem. I see an inefficiency and I want a little arbitrage, or there's a little pain. Some people, it's like the pain idea. There's a lot of pain. How do I solve it and monetize it? Great. And then there's the other, which is like the creative artist entrepreneur. I think for the most part, most people are just solving problems and trying to figure things out. It's a tricky business. There's a lot of risk, and there's a huge learning curve. So for a lot of people that I know, having a business income, something that they're doing, then they branch off into because you get into your career, your profession, whatever, and then you start to really see those inefficiencies. So you pick a field that you're interested in, and along the way, if you're entrepreneurial, you're going to break off and you're going to find solutions. Yeah. So I think a lot of people put the cart before the horse and think, I'm going to do it now. They have no real life experience, no corporate experience, no depth in any market. And I mean, just do the math. There's people and consulting companies that spend an insane amount of money to solve those exact types of problems. Doesn't mean you can't get lucky and hit it, but I think the craze of I'm going to go be an entrepreneur is. And I'm coming from the opposite, right? So the practical is, if you're fortunate enough to get into BYU, and I know a lot of kids that are unbelievably smart didn't. I just look at the kids in the halls here and I go, what a awesome group of kids, so deserving, so talented. Don't squander it. Don't get distracted by lights and glimmer and the idea of like entrepreneurship and the couple handful of success stories that propel you, and you have it's good to think about the stars and how to get there, but a lot of times to get there you need a rocket ship, you need fuel, there's structure and things to get into it. And I don't know. I mean, focus on school. You're here to increase human capital. That's why you're in school. So first and foremost, dedicate yourself to that. Don't use the entrepreneurship or anything else as the cop-out to not do well in school, because I don't really care. I'm going to do something else. Like, okay, well then how much better are you than the guy that got the AA or didn't go to school at all? Because I can promise you the guy that didn't go to school is super hungry and will maybe work you to death because they're pretty desperate and their childhood might not have been as clean and structured as yours. It needed to be to get you to the school, perhaps, for some people. And so I think kids, there's some, I don't know if that helps, but before you throw away the education or find excuses to not be doing your best, hit it hard. And if you do, you'll be successful in anything. I mean, if you can tackle school, it'll create opportunities. And if you just get fixated on the color white or red, you'll see red everywhere. The red stop sign, the red on shoes, the red on the wall. So if you're an entrepreneur and you've got that bug, no matter what, if it presents itself, you don't have to worry about it. You'll see it. And so, but if you run around and you're just looking for it, I worry that a lot aren't going to find it.
Thank you so much, Damian. This has been an awesome interview. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I think this will be very valuable for everybody. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I tried to plan this interview for about 4 months and finally got it to work. Got my schedule and Damian's schedule to work so that we could do this interview. And I hope that you guys actually did enjoy it. These lessons that he taught in this podcast have really impacted my life over the past 6, 7, 8 months, and I hope that you guys can take something away. Something that I'm trying to do is when I listen to podcasts or books or whatever, a lecture, I try to take some notes on what I learned, and then I'll try to take away one thing. I'll bold it in my system, and then I'll place that little action item into a list that I have, and these are all of the different action items that I follow and that I try to do, and I'll repeatedly go back to that approximately once a week, and it's been something that's been super beneficial to me. And sometimes you listen to things and you're like, all right, there's not anything I want to actually apply from that, but sometimes there is one thing where you hear it and you know that would bless your life in some way, but you're not going to take action on it unless you specifically set it aside and say, hey, I want to do this. So the idea is to be intentional about your life and how you're moving forward. So hopefully you guys can do that. Thank you guys again for being here, for listening to this podcast. I'm hoping to continue to grow it, to have amazing guests, and to go along this journey with you guys. Go follow Entrepreneur on Campus on Instagram, and if you enjoyed this, please leave a rating and review. It helps the standings in Apple and iTunes and Spotify. If you guys will leave a review and a rating for the podcast, feel free to share it with friends. Hopefully it's something that you feel comfortable sharing, and that it's cool enough and interesting enough that some people could find some value from this. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys again for listening. I love you. Have a good one.